Not long after our divorce was finalized, I unexpectedly received a massive dividend payout from a startup I had invested in. Meanwhile, my now ex-husband was beaming, getting ready to marry his mistress. But on that very wedding day, just one sentence from his sister left him standing there, completely speechless. I sat on the cold wooden bench in the hallway of the Cook County Courthouse. In my hands was the printed settlement agreement, black ink on white paper, every line and every word as cold as ice. The man standing opposite me was dressed up, to a point that was almost laughable. A crisp white dress shirt, a tailored navy blue tuxedo, his hair perfectly slicked back with expensive pomade. It looked less like the day we were terminating our 3-year marriage, and more like he was heading to his own wedding reception, which, as it turned out, he was. His name was Hunter. For 3 years, I called him my husband. From that exact second forward, I knew I had to get used to calling him my ex. Standing right beside Hunter was a woman a few years younger than me. Her name was Mia. She wore a tight cream-colored designer dress, held a Gucci handbag, and sported bright red lipstick. Her hand was looped securely through Hunter's left arm, her chin tilted up slightly, and her eyes looking at me couldn't hide a pallor, triumphant gleam. That kind of smirk women know it when they see it. It wasn't the smile of someone who was genuinely loved and respected. It was the smirk of a thief who thought she had just stolen the most valuable prize on earth. Hunter glanced at his Rolex and frowned. "Nora, what are you waiting for? Sign?" I have somewhere to be." I looked down at the paperwork in front of me. The condo was under his mother's name. The SUV was under Hunter's name. Our joint checking account had been practically drained weeks ago. As for me, after 3 years of being his wife, the agreement clearly stated I would receive a one-time alimony buyout of $10,000 to assist with transitioning. I looked up, staring straight into his eyes. "Hunter, over the last 3 years, when your mother had her bypass surgery, I stayed in the hospital and took care of her. When your sister got married, I drained my savings to help pay for her. Catering. When your firm was bleeding cash, I sold the vintage jewelry my grandmother left me and cashed out my mother's life insurance. And now, you're letting me walk away with $10,000? Mia let out a soft laugh, her voice sweet but sharp as a razor. "Nora, you're making this sound so dramatic. The company belongs to Hunter, and the assets are legally separated. He's being incredibly generous giving you that 10 grand. If you took this to trial, you wouldn't even get a dime." Hunter placed his hand on Mia's waist, almost as if to physically show me who he had chosen. "Mia is right. Nora, don't make a scene. Just sign it. The longer you drag this out, the worse it'll be for you." I looked at his hand resting on another woman's waist, and suddenly, my heart, I didn't ache the way I thought it would. Perhaps when a woman has been hurt for too long, by the very end, the tears know how to dry themselves. I picked up the pen, the tip pressing into the paper. I signed my name, Nora. Hunter immediately snatched the papers back, scrutinizing every page, terrified. I might have added or crossed out a word. When he was certain everything was exactly as he wanted, he let out a sigh of relief, grabbed Mia's hand, and turned away. He didn't ask where I would go, what I would eat, or how I would live. I walked out of the courthouse. The Chicago summer sun beat down on the blinding, white concrete. A breeze blew past, yet I felt a chill run down my spine despite the sweltering heat of the city. Before I could even open my phone to call an Uber, I heard a laugh from behind me. "Oh, Nora, is it done?" I turned around. It was Heather, Hunter's older sister. She was wearing a flashy, ruby red cocktail dress, her hair done up in a tight updo, a diamond necklace sparkling around her neck. She was holding a stack of pristine wedding envelopes, her face glowing as if she were heading to the party of the century. Heather walked down the courthouse steps, looking me up and down before clicking, then her tongue. "I heard you got $10,000? Well, I suppose that's enough. For you to move back to your hometown, open a little diner or a dollar store, and find some simple guy to marry. Though, let's be honest, it's hard for a divorced woman." I stayed silent. Emboldened, Heather leaned in closer and whispered, "By the way, Hunter and Mia are hosting their reception at the Grand Solaris Hotel, downtown this afternoon. Do you want to come and have a glass of champagne too? Celebrate?" "Ah, never mind. Looking at you, you probably don't have a single dress that fits the dress code. You'd just embarrass our family." She burst into laughter, and as if that wasn't enough, she turned back and dropped one last comment. "Nora, honestly, you just didn't have what it takes to be part of this family. 3 years, and you couldn't even give my mother a grandchild. It makes sense Hunter dumped you. Look at Mia, young, beautiful, comes from a good family. That's the kind of woman who deserves my brother." I stood completely still, absorbing every single word. There are insults that don't knock you down immediately. Instead, they drip into your soul, drop, until they form a pool of toxic mud. For 3 years, I had been living in that mud without even realizing it. After Heather left, I finally pulled out my phone to order a ride. Right at that moment, my screen lit up. A banking app notification popped up clearly. "Your account has received a deposit of $2,500,000. I stood dead in my tracks. $2.5 million. I thought I were playing tricks on me. I counted the zeros. I counted them again. My heart began to pound so hard my hands started to shake. Immediately after, a text message popped up from Quinn, an old friend from my Tuesday college days. "Nora, did you get your dividend yet? My tech startup just got acquired by a major conglomerate in Silicon Valley. You were one of our angel investors. Your cut is exactly $250,000. Check your account and let me know." I froze. $250,000. Then why did my bank account show over $2.5 million? Before I could reply to Quinn, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but the caller ID showed my bank. A polite male voice introduced himself as a senior client relationship manager. He confirmed that a massive wire transfer had hit my account, but also informed me that their system was running a security check, because it appeared the transferring party might have accidentally added an extra zero. I hung up, standing in the middle of the courthouse plaza, my hand gripping my phone tightly. Truth be told, 3 years ago, when Quinn called me saying he was launching a software startup and desperately needed seed money to finish the prototype, I transferred him the very last of the money I had managed to hide away, a mere $10,000. When Hunter found out, he called me an idiot. He said women who didn't know how to hold on to cash deserve to be poor for the rest of their lives. I never expected that $10,000 to turn into equity, and I certainly never expected that on the exact day I was kicked out of my marriage, the universe would place such a massive trump card right into my hands. I looked down the busy street. The Grand Solaris Hotel was only a 20-minute drive away. Hunter was hosting his wedding reception with Mia there. My ex-mother-in-law was probably smiling from ear to ear. Heather was probably getting ready to stand on stage and badmouth me to their entire extended family. I took a deep breath and raised my hand to hail a yellow cab. The driver rolled down the window. "Where to, miss?" I opened the door and got in, my voice eerily calm. "The Grand Solaris Hotel, please." As the car rolled through the bustling streets of Chicago, the city blurring, past the window, I looked at my reflection in the glass. A faded white, button-down shirt, worn-out black slacks, my hair tied up in a messy ponytail, my face pale from a sleepless night. But for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel pitiful. I just found it incredibly funny. "Hunter, did you really think $10,000 was enough to buy 3 years of my life? Did you think I'd walk out of your house with absolutely nothing? Well then, this afternoon I will come and drink a glass of your wedding champagne. Not to cry, but to let your entire family see clearly that the woman you just shoved into the mud was never as beneath you as you thought." The cab pulled up to the luxurious entrance of the Grand Solaris Hotel just as Brainsley's upbeat, elegant string music echoed from the grand ballroom. That joyous sound, if heard on any other day, would have felt perfectly normal. But today, it felt like tiny hammers tapping against my chest, not painful enough to make me cry, but leaving a dull, cold ache deep inside. I paid the fare, stepped out, and stood before the hotel's grand entrance for a boxo moment. Right at the doorway was a massive floral arch made of deep red roses and white orchids. In the center hung a beautifully printed welcome sign featuring a photo of Hunter and Mia. They were pressed close together. Hunter in his white tuxedo jacket, Mia in her dazzling bridal gown, smiling radiantly. Beneath it read the words, "Happily ever after." I looked at those words and felt a cynical laugh bubble up. This morning he was signing divorce papers with me at the county courthouse. Was standing here as the groom to another woman. It turns out that to some men, a marriage is just like an old coat worn until they get bored of it, then easily replaced. Meanwhile, the person who spent years washing, mending, and carefully preserving that coat gets tossed out the front door. I looked down at my clothes. An old shirt with slightly frayed cuffs, simple, black pants, cheap flats I bought at a discount store. Compared to the guests, walking into the hotel draped in silk, sequins, and designer suits, I was entirely out of place. Yet, strangely, I didn't feel ashamed. I wanted to show up looking exactly like this. Exactly like the woman they had just looked down upon. Exactly like the woman they thought deserved a few pennies before disappearing into the shadows. I walked inside. A hostess holding a clipboard and wearing an elegant black dress stopped me politely. "Excuse me, ma'am. May I see your invitation?" I looked at her with complete composure. "I am the groom's ex-wife. I'm here to offer my congratulations." The hostess froze, a flicker of sheer panic in her eyes. In the high-end hospitality industry, she had probably seen her fair share of drama. But an ex-wife, crashing her ex-husband's wedding on the exact day their divorce was, I finalized was likely a first. I didn't give her a hard time. I just gave her a polite nod and walked straight past her toward the elevators. The reception was on the 3rd floor. The moment the elevator doors parted, the plausibly innocent and sound of chatter and laughter rushed over me. The ballroom was brilliantly illuminated by crystal chandeliers, the tables draped in pristine white linens. A towering centerpiece of fresh flowers sat on every table. The room was packed, with nearly 40 tables of guests. Hunter's family was large relatives who flew in from out of state, business partners, old neighbors. Everyone was dressed to the nines, their faces glowing with joy, as if this were a genuinely sacred union, rather than a shameless, rushed replacement of a wife. I picked a shadowed table near the back corner and sat down. Nobody recognized me immediately, which made sense. To them, I was someone not worth remembering. During my 3 years with that family, whenever there was a holiday, a barbecue, or a dinner party, I was always the silent ghost in the prostate. Kitchen washing vegetables, chopping onions, clearing plates, refilling glasses. They were more accustomed to seeing me with my head down, doing chores, rather than sitting among them as a guest. On the stage, the MC was speaking with enthusiastic flair. "Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, today is a beautiful day for Hunter and Mia. Let's give a massive round of applause to bless the happy couple." The applause thundered through the room, and the grand double doors swung open. Hunter walked in, holding Mia's hand to the sound of an upbeat love song. He was smiling so broadly. It was a smile I had rarely seen directed at me over the last 3 years. Hunter used to tell me that business was stressful, that a man came home exhausted and had no energy left to be sweet. Yet today, he smiled so gently, bending down to fix the train of Mia's dress, offering his hand to help her up the stage steps, looking at her with overwhelming adoration in front of hundreds of people. I sat still, my hands resting on my lap. It wasn't jealousy I felt, it was pity for my past self. For 3 years, I had believed his clumsy excuses. I thought he was just stoic. I thought he didn't know how to be affectionate. I thought that if I just tried a little harder, endured a little more, one day he would understand my heart. But the truth is, men aren't clueless about how to treat a woman well. They simply choose which woman they want to treat well. My ex-mother-in-law, Grace, was sitting at the front VIP table. Today she wore a flan Annie with her deep plum evening gown, a diamond tennis bracelet glittering on her wrist, her face stretched into an unyielding grin. She grabbed the arm of the relative sitting next to her and spoke loud enough for my table in the back to hear. "Our Mia is just perfect inside and out. She's educated, owns her own property, comes from good stock." My Hunter finally opened his eyes and saw the light. Heather, sitting right beside her, immediately chimed in. "Exactly, Mom. Not like Nora. She always looked so poor and miserable. Everywhere she went, she embarrassed our family. And after 3 years, she couldn't even give you a grandchild to hold. Grace sighed, feigning pity. Oh, let's not mention her and bring bad luck. Today is a happy day. Just think of it as our family finally getting rid of a curse. Hearing that, I let out a very soft chuckle. A curse. They called me a curse. But over the past 3 years, who was the one staying awake all night in the Joder hospital holding Grace's hand after her bypass surgery? Who was the one who paid for Heather's ridiculously expensive wedding catering when her in-laws demanded more? Who was the one hustling for every lead, sitting in coffee shops until midnight to help Hunter land his very first corporate contract? They forgot those things so quickly. Perhaps when people decide to be cruel, gratitude is the very first thing they sell off. I opened my phone and checked my banking app again. The number over $2.5 million was still sitting there, cold and undeniable. Right then, the MC invited Heather onto the stage to give a speech. Heather adjusted her ruby dress, beamed brightly, and stepped up, gripping the microphone with both hands as if she were about to deliver the Gettysburg Address. To all our family, friends, and esteemed guests, I am Hunter's older sister. Today, seeing my brother find true happiness fills my heart with so much joy. The room erupted in applause. Heather paused, offered a smug smile, and continued. Truth be told, Hunter previously suffered through a very unhappy marriage. His ex was impoverished, ungrateful, and completely useless to him as to a partner. 3 years with no children, no blessings, and she brought nothing but bad luck to our family business. Thank God Hunter woke up in time, ended it early, and started fresh with Mia. A few tables chuckled. Some people leaned in to whisper to each other. Heather was on a roll now. Just this morning at the courthouse, she actually demanded more money from us. But in the end, she had to take her pathetic $10,000 and walk away. Honestly, for a woman who doesn't know how to keep a husband, that's what she deserves. I set my water glass down on the table. The clink of the glass was barely audible, but inside me, something heavy was finally set down as well. It wasn't rage. It was the absolute end of my hesitation. I stood up. A woman sitting next to me gently tugged my sleeve, thinking I was heading to the restroom, and whispered, Honey, they're about to serve the filet mignon. Be quick, or it'll get cold. I smiled at her, said nothing, and began walking step by step toward the stage. At first, no one noticed. All eyes were glued to Heather, Hunter, and Mia, but as I approached the VIP tables, Grace was the first to spot me. The smile on her face froze instantly. She shot up from her chair. Nora, what are you doing here? Her voice wasn't incredibly loud, but it was sharp enough to make the surrounding tables turn their heads. Heather, standing on the stage, finally saw me too. All the color drained from her face. Her hand shook, rattling the microphone, before her voice pierced through the speakers, high and shrill. You actually have the nerve to show up here? Nora, are you trying to ruin my brother's wedding? The entire ballroom fell dead silent. Hunter snapped his head toward me. In that split second, I saw genuine panic in his eyes, but it quickly morphed into anger. He stepped down from the stage, marched right up to me, and lowered his voice, hissing through his teeth. Nora, don't make a scene. Whatever it is, we can talk about it later. Today is my day. I looked at him and asked softly, Your happy day? So what about my sad day? Mia hurried over and grabbed Hunter's arm. Her eyes welled up with tears with impeccable timing. Nora, I know you're upset, but Hunter and I truly love each other. You already signed the papers. Can we please just maintain a little dignity here? I shifted my gaze to Mia. Dignity? When I was his legal wife, did you maintain any dignity for me? Mia's face turned paper white. Whispers began to spread across the room like wildfire. Some murmured that I was pitiful, others said I was bitter, and a few sneered that a divorced woman crashing a wedding had zero class. Heather stomped down from the stage, her high heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor. She stopped right in my face and pointed a manicured finger at me. Nora, look at yourself. Dressing like that and walking into a 5-star hotel? Do you have no shame? Our family giving you $10,000 was an act of charity. What more do you want? I stared at the finger pointing mere inches from my nose. Then, with total calm, I pulled out my phone. Heather, are you done talking? Heather paused. I opened my banking app and held the screen up right in front of Hunter, right in front of Heather, Grace, and Mia. Now, I want all of you to look very closely. The woman you called impoverished and useless just received exactly how much? Hunter glanced down. It took only a fraction of a second for his entire face to change. Heather snatched my wrist to pull the phone closer to her face. Her lips trembled as she counted the zeros, her voice breaking into a breathless squeak. $2.5 million? The ballroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, and exclamations bounced off the walls. I calmly pulled my hand back, looked at the stunned, pale faces surrounding me, and smiled. Exactly. Just enough for me to buy myself a glass of your wedding champagne. For a few seconds, it felt as though someone had pressed the mute button on the Brodingen. Entire reception. Then, the noise shattered into chaos. Gossip, sharp intakes of the breath, people leaning over tables to interrogate each other. All of it blended into a chaotic symphony that I had never found myself in the center of before. But strangely, I wasn't scared. My mind had never been clearer. It felt like waking up from a decade-long coma. Hunter stood frozen in front of me, his eyes glued to the phone I had just slipped back into my pocket. His lips quivered slightly, as if his brain was misfiring, trying to formulate a sentence. I looked at him and felt no sense of familiarity. All I saw was a stranger, standing in awe of a number he couldn't even fathom. Heather, on the other hand, was in deep denial. Her voice pitched upward, defensively. That's impossible. Nora, you faked that, didn't you? There are fake banking apps everywhere now, I laughed. Not a mocking laugh, but a laugh born out of sheer exhaustion with this predictable reaction. When people can't accept reality, they will invent any delusion to deny it. Heather, if you think it's fake, call the bank. Or better yet, do you want me to wire you 50 grand right now just so you can see if it clears? My response elicited scattered chuckles from the surrounding tables. Heather's jaw snapped shut. Her hands clenched into fists, but she didn't dare say another word. Grace stumbled forward from behind them, her knees buckling slightly, her voice shaking. Nora, is it true? Is that money really yours? I turned to look at her. For 3 years I had called her mom. I said it, naturally, without a second thought. But in this moment, the word got stuck in my throat. Why does it matter to you? Just this morning you called me a curse. You said I was garbage that needed to be thrown out. Why do you suddenly care how much money I have? Grace froze, her eyes turning red, whether from humiliation or regret. I didn't. No. Mia, who had been silent next to Hunter, finally spoke up. Her voice had lost its sugary sweetness and now wavered with insecurity. Nora, I didn't know you had this kind of money. If I had known, I stared her down. You wouldn't have stolen my husband? Mia stiffened, biting her lip hard. I didn't waste another word on her. I turned. Back to Hunter. You want to know where the money came from, don't you? Hunter swallowed hard, giving a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. 3 years ago, I gave the last of my savings to a college friend for his tech startup. Today, that startup was acquired. The shareholders got their payouts. It's that simple. A man sitting at a nearby table couldn't help but interject. What kind of investment yields that kind of return? I didn't look at him, addressing the room in general. Not everyone has the guts to throw their very last dollar into an unproven idea. I took the risk. So I got the reward. That silenced the room. Perhaps they were beginning to understand that what they were witnessing wasn't just absurd, dumb luck, but the result of a massive gamble that none of them would have ever dared to take. Hunter suddenly took a step toward me, his voice hoarse. Nora, why? Why? Didn't you tell me about this? I looked at him, speaking slowly. Tell you? Why? So you could stop me? Or so? You could drain that money to keep your failing company afloat? Hunter went completely silent. I knew he understood exactly what I meant. For 3 years, every time his business was in the red, he would look at me with those eyes, a mix of begging and demanding, and I would always cave. Every single time. Heather, seemingly snapping out of a trance, grabbed Hunter's arm. Hunter, stop talking to her. So what if she has money? Let her keep it. Today is your wedding day. That sentence landed like an invisible slap across the room. Right. Today is Hunter and Mia's wedding. But in this moment, Nobody in the room cared about the bride and groom. Every single eye was locked on me. The MC stood awkwardly on the stage, clutching his microphone, utterly terrified to speak. I scanned the room one last time, my voice echoing clearly in the quiet hall. I didn't come here to ruin a wedding. I just wanted to say one thing before I leave. No one interrupted. Even Hunter stood perfectly still. I took a deep breath, enunciating every word. 3 years ago, I walked into this family with nothing but genuine love in my heart. I thought that if I lived decently, worked hard, and took care of this family, eventually, I would be valued. I looked at Grace, then at Heather. But it turns out, in this family, decency isn't viewed as a virtue. It's viewed as stupidity. The atmosphere in the ballroom grew incredibly heavy. I don't blame anyone here. Everyone chooses how they want to live. Hunter chose money. Heather chose vanity. Grace chose convenience. And me? I chose to trust. The wrong people. I paused. But I won't make that mistake again. Hunter suddenly surged forward, his voice frantic. Nora, don't say that. I didn't. I held up a hand, cutting him off. You don't need to explain. I already understand. Standing beside him, Mia's eyes were darting nervously. The triumphant smirk from the courthouse was entirely gone, replaced by a very raw, very real panic. Perhaps she was finally realizing that the man whose arm she was clutching wasn't the ultimate prize she thought he was. Heather tried to put up a tough front one last time. Nora, are you done talking? If you're done, leave. Stop wasting everyone's time. I turned to her. Heather, earlier you said I was poor. You said I didn't deserve to stand in this room. Do you still think that? Heather opened her mouth, then snapped it shut. It wasn't that she didn't want to speak. It was that she had absolutely nothing to say. I smiled. It's fine. I don't need an answer. I turned around, preparing to walk away. Just then, a loud crash echoed from behind me. Crash. Someone had bumped into the towering champagne pyramid near the stage. The glasses came crashing down, shattering across the hardwood floor, champagne pooling everywhere. The harsh, jarring noise echoed through the grand hall. Everyone jumped. I had no idea who knocked it over, but to me, the scene looked exactly like how my marriage had ended. Shattered into 1,000 pieces, impossible to put back together. I kept walking, not looking back. From behind me, Hunter's voice rang out, no longer trying to maintain his composed groom facade. Nora, stop! I paused. I didn't turn around. I just stood there. Hunter ran up behind me, breathing heavily, his voice bordering on a plea. Nora, can we talk? About this? I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, then opened them. Talk about what? I stood still, my back to him, listening to his ragged breathing. The feeling was so sickeningly familiar. It was exactly how he used to stand behind me when his business was tanking, feeding me soft, desperate words, so I wouldn't have the heart to say no. But today, everything was different. He was exactly the same, but I was not. I turned around slowly. What exactly do you want to talk about? Hunter stared at me, panic and calculation warring in his eyes, looking like a man who just realized he had thrown away a winning lottery ticket. Nora. The divorce. What happened today? I think I was too hasty. Maybe we can discuss this? The moment the words left his mouth, the ballroom erupted into gasps again. No, one could believe a groom, standing at his own wedding reception, was asking his ex-wife to reconcile right in front of his new bride. Mia stood behind him, her face completely drained of blood. Her hands gripped the fabric of her expensive wedding dress until her knuckles turned white. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. Heather's jaw literally dropped, staring at her brother in absolute disbelief. I looked at Hunter for a long moment and asked quietly, "Discuss what, exactly?" Hunter swallowed hard, lowering his voice. "We just signed the preliminary paperwork. The judge hasn't stamped the final decree yet. If you want, we could." He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone knew exactly what he meant. The groom was trying to call off the divorce and cancel his new wedding. The ballroom was dead silent. I laughed. This time I laughed out loud. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was pure amusement at the absolute absurdity of it all. "Hunter, You are standing in front of your new bride, at your own wedding. Reception telling me you want to get back together? Hunter didn't even glance at Mia. His eyes were locked on me. I know this is the wrong time to say it, but Nora, I realize now, I made a huge mistake. Mia couldn't take it anymore. She rushed forward and yanked his arm. Hunter! What the hell are you saying? Today is our wedding day. Hunter violently shoved her arm off him, his voice a harsh bark. Shut up, Mia. I'm talking. The way he shoved her away was the exact same way he used to push me away when I wanted to have a serious conversation. Back then, I thought I was just being annoying. Now, I understood it wasn't that I was annoying. It was just that to him, women's feelings were completely disposable. Mia stood paralyzed, tears spilling down her face, ruining her flawless makeup. I looked at her, and my heart felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no vindication. Nothing. Hunter turned back to me, dropping his voice to a whisper. Nora, I know I hurt you, but I swear the person I truly love is you. I was just confused. I stared straight into his soul. Confused enough to marry someone else? Hunter choked. I thought I didn't matter that much to you. I shook my head slowly. No, you didn't think that. You knew exactly how much you mattered. You just thought that no matter how horribly you treated me, I would never leave. That completely silenced him. Because it was the truth. For 3 years, I was always there. Despite his coldness, his neglect, his blatant infidelity, I stayed. I waited. I believed. When a man is used to a woman being beside him for too long, he starts to believe she is a permanent fixture until the day she finally walks out the door. Heather couldn't hold back anymore. She pushed her way to the front. Nora, stop. Playing games. He's only saying this because he saw your bank account. Don't let it go to your head. I turned to Heather. You're absolutely right. If I didn't have this money, would he be standing here saying these things? Hunter panicked. No, Nora, it's not about the money. I swear. I looked at him for a long, long time. Hunter, do you even believe the words coming out of your own mouth? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Not because he didn't want to lie, but because even he knew he couldn't sell it. I took a breath, my voice perfectly steady. Do you know something? Earlier, when your sister was on that stage calling me poor, saying I was useless, saying, you dumped me because I couldn't get pregnant. If this were a year ago, I would have cried. But right now, I just find it hilarious. I swept my gaze over his entire family because I finally realized something. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It's that none of you are qualified to judge my worth. The air in the room felt heavy as lead. Grace shuffled forward, her voice weak and shaking. Nora. Sweetheart, please don't say that. Mom knows she was wrong. I looked at her. The arrogant gleam she had worn all evening was completely gone, replaced entirely by fear and regret. 3 months ago, when she was in the ICU, I stayed awake all night feeding her broth, wiping the sweat from her forehead. She held my hand and called me her angel. Yet the second she was discharged, she turned around and told Hunter to divorce me. People change so fast. I don't blame you, Grace. You just always choose whatever benefits you the most. Grace bowed her head, unable to meet my eyes. Hunter took another step toward me, his voice sounding like a beg. Nora, I know I messed up. Please, just give me one more chance. I'll make it up to you. I raised a hand, stopping him dead in his tracks. I looked right into his eyes and spoke very slowly. Do you want to know what I hate about you the most? Hunter shook his head, his eyes red. It's not that you cheated on me. It's not that you hid assets. It's not that you threw me out of our home with nothing. I paused. It's that you made me feel stupid. The words hung in the air, light but devastating. I had trusted him. I had poured my money, my time, and my love into him. I thought I was building a marriage, but I was just funding a parasite. Hunter trembled. Nora. I shook my head. Don't say my name like that. It sounds entirely fake. I turned my body toward the exit. We're done. Who you marry, how you live. It has nothing to do with me anymore. Desperate, Hunter lunged forward, trying to grab my wrist. Nora, don't leave. Mean it. I took a swift step back, dodging his hand. You should get back to the stage. Your bride is waiting? The sentence cut like a knife. Hunter whipped his head around to look at Mia. She stood a few feet away, sobbing uncontrollably, her eyes full of agony and utter despair. Perhaps in that moment, she finally understood the reality of the situation. A man willing to throw away his wife for her would gladly throw her away the second someone wealthier came along. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked toward the exit. This time, nobody dared to block my path. Nobody dared to call me worthless. The only sound in the grand ballroom was the steady, rhythmic clicking of my shoes against the marble floor, the sound of a closed chapter. As I reached the doors, Hunter's voice echoed weakly behind me. Nora, are you really never coming back? I stopped for a single second. I didn't turn around. Never. Just one word. The final period at the end of a 3-year sentence. I walked out of the ballroom, the heavy double doors swinging shut behind me. Outside, the afternoon breeze was soft, the intense heat of the sun finally breaking. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and pulled out my phone. Quinn had sent another text. Nora, we need to talk. The bank just flagged an error. The amount they transferred. I froze, my thumb hovering over the screen. A strange sensation washed over me. I opened the message. In that exact moment, I realized the drama wasn't quite over. I stood outside the Grand Solaris, the text from Quinn illuminating my screen. Nora, finance just called me. There was a glitch in the bank's automated wire system. Your payout was supposed to be $250,000, but the system accidentally wired you $2,500,000. The excess funds will be clawed back by the bank by the end of business today or tomorrow morning. Do not spend that money. I stood perfectly still for a few seconds. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't panicked. It felt like everything was simply snapping back to reality. I looked at the $2.5 million sitting in my account. To most people, $250,000 was still a massive amount of money. To me, it was life-changing. But more importantly, it was money I had earned myself. It wasn't charity. It wasn't an insulting divorce settlement. I smiled a very small, genuine smile. The universe didn't hand me a ridiculous, unearned fortune, but it didn't leave me empty-handed either. And that was enough. Before I could put my phone away, I heard heavy footsteps running out the hotel. Doors. Nora. I turned around. Hunter came sprinting out of the lobby. His tuxedo jacket was completely unbuttoned, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck, his slicked back hair falling into his face. He looked less like a groom and more like a man fleeing a burning building. He skidded to a halt in front of me, panting heavily. Nora, you haven't left yet. I looked at him calmly. I was just about to. Hunter nodded frantically, as if terrified I would vanish into thin air. Thank God, I thought. He didn't finish the thought, but the panic in his eyes was evident. He was terrified of losing his chance to secure the bag. I wasn't in a rush anymore. Do you have something else to say? Hunter looked at me, his expression shifting. The sheer panic faded slightly, replaced by a rapid, calculating gleam. Nora, what I said in there. I meant it. I want you back, and it's not because of the money. I didn't interrupt. I just let him dig his grave. He pressed on. I've been thinking about it. For 3 years, you were the one, beside me. You're the one who actually understands me. Mia. She was just a mistake. A momentary lapse in judgment. I raised an eyebrow. A mistake you decided to marry? Hunter stumbled over his words. I got swept up in things, and I thought you were never going to leave me, so He stopped talking. Even he realized he had just accidentally told the brutal truth. I nodded. Exactly. You thought I would never leave, so you thought you could do whatever you wanted. Hunter dropped his gaze. Nora, I'm so sorry. I didn't respond right away. I looked at the man standing in front of me. The man who used to be my husband, my entire world. The man I thought I was going to build a family with. Now, looking at him, he was just a stranger. Hunter, I said, using his name with an icy distance that made him flinch. Why? Why are you looking at me like that? Because it's appropriate. The air between us grew cold. I continued in a flat, even tone. You say you want to get back together. Let me ask you one question. Hunter immediately looked up, desperate. Ask me anything. If I didn't have that money today, if I was still the woman in the faded shirt and cheap shoes, standing in your ballroom being publicly humiliated by your sister, would you have run out here to stop me from leaving? The question wasn't loud, but it struck him like a physical blow. He opened his question, mouth to say yes, but the word died in his throat because he knew the answer. I knew the answer. I looked at him with pity. You don't need to answer. I already know. Hunter shook his head, his voice frantic again. No, Nora, you're misunderstanding. I genuinely love you. You love money, I cut in. The finality in my voice stopped him dead. I looked straight into his eyes. You don't love me. You don't love Mia. You only love the feeling of being superior. You love being admired. You love being the man on top. Whoever gives you that feeling, you'll stay with them. Hunter trembled. No, I'm not like that. I didn't raise my voice. 3 years ago, I gave you my savings and offered you stability. So you married me. When Mia showed up with a trust fund, a pretty face, and business connections, you chose her. Now you think I have millions of dollars, so you want to crawl back. I paused. Hunter, you aren't choosing a partner. You're choosing a portfolio. Hunter stared at the concrete, unable to argue, unable to defend himself because there was no defense. I let out a soft sigh. You know something? Earlier, in the ballroom, when you begged for me back, I wasn't even angry. I just felt sorry for you. Hunter's head snapped up, bewildered. Sorry? Yes. Sorry for a man who doesn't even know what he actually wants out of life, who just blindly chases whatever shiny object is dangled in front of his face. A breeze swept past, rustling the hem of my shirt. I reached into my pocket and touched my phone. Oh, by the way, about the money. Hunter's eyes instantly lit up. It was undeniable. I saw right through him. There was a glitch in the banking system. The transfer was wrong. My actual payout is only $250,000, not $2.5 million. Hunter froze. The transformation on his face was cinematic. In the span of a single second, I saw hope shatter into shock, followed instantly by rapid mental calculus. The desire to abandon his new bride for me visibly evaporated. $250,000 was a nice chunk of change, but to him, it wasn't cancel my wedding and endure public humiliation money. I smiled. See? The second the number changed, your eyes changed. Hunter quickly shook his head, trying to salvage his pride. No, $250,000 is still a lot of money. You don't have to explain, I said softly. Whether it was 200 grand or 20 million, I was never coming back. That sentence wasn't to prove a point to him. It was to prove a point to myself. I turned around. Go back inside. Your wedding isn't over yet. Hunter stood rooted to the spot. Nora, I won't be looking back. Do you have anything else to say? His voice was barely a whisper. Are you going to be happy? I paused for a second. A year ago, that question would have broken me. But today, I was just starting over. My life is just beginning. Yours is just ending. I walked away. Not too fast, not too slow. Just walking. This time, Hunter. I didn't chase after me. I think he finally realized that there are some things in life that, once dropped, can never be picked back up. I made it to the curb and got into the Uber I had ordered. Settling into the back seat, I looked out the window. The Grand Solaris Hotel faded into the butterburst. Distance, a marriage, a family, a whole era of my life faded away with it. My phone buzzed. It was Quinn again. Nora, sorry about the heart attack with the numbers. The finance guys are fixing it now. But hey, your share is still the largest among the minority stakeholders. When we IPO next year, it'll be worth a lot more. I typed back a quick reply. I know. Thank you. I locked my screen, closed my eyes, and let my head rest against the seat. There was no more screaming in my head, no more insults, no more condescending glares. There was just empty space, not a terrifying emptiness, but the kind of blank canvas you need to start building something new. The car merged onto the highway, the late afternoon sun casting long, golden shadows across the pavement. I opened my eyes. For the first time in a very, very long time, I wasn't thinking about Hunter. I wasn't thinking about Mia or my ex-in-laws. I was thinking about myself. Where would I live? What would I do? Who was I going to become? I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never make the wrong choice again. The Uber drove through streets that felt both familiar and foreign. I sat back, watching the city glide by like a slow-motion film. My mind was completely quiet. It was the kind of profound silence you only experience after surviving a hurricane, not because everything is perfectly fine, but because there is simply nothing left to destroy. I wasn't going home. Honestly, I didn't have a place to call home in the traditional sense anymore. The condo was in Grace's name. I had signed my rights away that morning. For 3 years, I had lived there. I had picked out every mug, every curtain, every throw pillow. Yet, when I left, I couldn't take a single thing with me, not even a jacket hanging by the door. I had walked out with just a duffel bag containing a few changes of clothes and my personal documents. I gave the driver a new destination. Could you take me to a nice hotel? Downtown? Somewhere on Michigan Avenue. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror, slightly surprised. Probably because a woman in a faded button-down and cheap flats didn't look like the typical clientele for the Magnificent Mile. But he didn't ask questions. He just nodded and changed lanes. 20 minutes later, the car pulled up to a massive, gleaming, high-rise hotel in the heart of downtown Chicago. The glass facade reflected the setting sun, and the lobby inside glowed with warm, expensive light. I paid the driver, took a deep breath, and walked through the revolving doors. At the reception desk, a young clerk looked me up and down. Her eyes paused for a microsecond before her professional smile locked into place. Good evening. Ma'am, looking to book a room? I nodded. I need your best available room for a few nights. She typed on her keyboard. We currently have an executive suite available. The rate is $350 a night. Would that be acceptable? $350 a night. A week ago, I would have immediately shaken my head and walked out. Today, I just pulled out my debit card. I'll take it. The clerk was mildly surprised, but smoothly processed the transaction. When I handed her my ID, she looked at my name and asked politely, "Will it just be you? Staying with us, Miss Nora?" "Yes," I replied. "Just me." It was a simple answer, but saying it out loud felt incredibly liberating. For the first time in 3 years, I was sleeping somewhere that wasn't my in-laws. Property, wasn't my childhood bedroom, and wasn't a place where I had to walk on eggshells to please someone else. It was temporary, but it felt like absolute freedom. I took the key card and went up to my floor. I pushed the door open to a massive room. A king-sized bed with pristine white sheets and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. I dropped my duffel bag, walked over to the glass, and pulled back the curtains. The city was transitioning into evening, the streetlights flickering on, the brake lights of cars on Lakeshore Drive, stretching out like a glowing red river. I stood there for a long time. I didn't cry, I didn't laugh, I just stood there. Then, my phone buzzed. I looked down at the unknown number. I wasn't going to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello? There was a second of silence on the line before a familiar female voice spoke. The arrogant, shrill tone was completely gone. "Nora, it's Heather." I wasn't shocked. "What do you want?" Heather took a sharp breath, desperately trying to keep her voice steady. "Nora, I want to talk to you. Could you come back to the Solaris? Or I can come to you." I leaned against the cold glass of the window. What is there to talk about? About what happened today. And about family. I let out a dry laugh. "Heather, this morning you called me a curse. You said I was an embarrassment to your bloodline. Now you want to talk about family? Do. You really think that works on me?" Heather went silent for several agonizing seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was much lower. I'm sorry. If she had said those words a year ago, I might have teared up. But now, it sounded exactly like what it was. A master key she was trying to use to unlock a door she desperately needed open. "Sorry for what?" I asked flatly. Heather fumbled. For saying those nasty things. For misunderstanding you." I let her squirm for a moment. "Heather, are you apologizing because you realize You were wrong, or are you apologizing because you think I'm a millionaire? The question choked her. Through the phone, I could clearly hear her, hyperventilating slightly. Nora, You don't have to answer, I cut her off, my voice monotone. I already know. Heather panicked. Nora, please don't look at it like that. Our family has always thought of you as one of us. I barked a laugh. One of you? You kicked one of you to the curb with a $10,000 check. Heather went completely mute. If you don't have a specific reason for calling, I'm hanging up, I said. Nora, wait, Heather yelled. My dad wants to talk to you. I froze. No. Yeah, my dad, Thomas. He's right here. He wants to talk to you. I stayed silent. Thomas, my ex-father-in-law, was the quietest person in that house. During my 3 years there, he never actively defended me, but he never insulted me either. He just kept his distance, staying entirely neutral. Put him on, I said. A moment later, a deep, older male voice came through the speaker. Nora? It's Thomas. Hello, Thomas. How are you doing? The polite small talk felt incredibly bitter under the circumstances. I'm fine, I said, skipping the pleasantries. Thomas sighed heavily. I never expected today to turn out the way it did. I said nothing. I know Hunter messed up badly, Thomas continued. But regardless, you two were husband and wife. I interrupted gently but firmly. What is it you want to say, Thomas? He paused, then spoke carefully. Nora, I'm not going to ask you to get back together with my son, but I am asking you not to ruin him. I frowned. What do you mean? His company. I know you were the one managing the relationships with all his biggest corporate clients. If you pull your support, or if you take to them, he's going to go under. Ah, I understood perfectly now. This phone call wasn't about repairing a relationship. It was about protecting a profit margin. I looked out at the glittering skyline, my voice ice cold. Thomas, exactly what I did for his company for the last 3 years. The fact that I'm stepping away is just the natural consequence of a divorce. I understand, Thomas sighed. But could you please just promise not to poach his client list? I smiled, though there was no humor in it. Those clients trust me, Thomas. They aren't his property. The line went dead quiet. I continued. I won't actively try to destroy his business out of spite, but I will not step aside and let him keep the network I built with my own blood, sweat, and tears. That is my boundary. I won't seek baseless revenge, but I'm done being a martyr. Thomas spoke slowly. I understand. Have a good night, Nora. You too. I hung up. Tossing my phone onto the bed, I stared up at the ceiling. One day, it took exactly one day for every dynamic in my life to flip upside down. From a discarded daughter-in-law to a total outsider. From a woman they mocked to a woman they feared. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel sad. I just saw things with brutal clarity. I finally saw who was genuine and who only valued me when there was a price tag attached. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Quinn. Are you free tomorrow? I want to meet up. Need to talk to you about the company. Details. I typed back. Yes, I want to meet with you too. I plugged my phone in and finally crawled under the covers. Outside, the city of Chicago was wide awake, buzzing with energy. Inside my room, I was entirely alone. But for the first time in years, I wasn't lonely. Because I knew that, starting tomorrow, my life was entirely in my own hands. That night, my sleep was fragmented. Not out of anxiety, but because my brain was rapidly sorting through the massive pile of debris left behind by my old life. It was like finally opening the door to a hoarder's room dust flies. Everywhere, junk spills out, and you have to look at every single item to decide whether to keep it or throw it in the trash. I realized my past was the same. I couldn't just erase it, but I could figure out where to box it up and store it. I woke up earlier than usual the next morning. I pulled back the curtains and let the morning sun flood the suite. The light wasn't glaring, it was warm and welcoming. I stood in front of the full-length mirror for a long time, staring at myself. It was the same face, but the eyes were different. The constant hesitation was gone. That desperate, needy look of a woman waiting for someone else's validation had vanished. Instead, there was a sharp, undeniable clarity. I changed into a simple, polished outfit. The crisp white blouse I had bought the night before, tailored black trousers, sensible flats. I pulled my hair back into a sleek ponytail and applied just a touch of makeup, some foundation, and a sheer lip color. I didn't need to prove my worth to anyone anymore, but I wanted to look in the mirror and respect the woman staring back. Quinn wanted to meet at a high-end coffee shop in the Loop, near his new Clay's corporate office. When I walked in, he was already at a table. He looked exactly the same as he did in our college days. Sleeves rolled up on a button-down shirt, a laptop open, a stack of folders in front of him. He saw me, stood up, and smiled. "Nora." I nodded and pulled out a chair. "Have you been waiting long?" "Nah, just got here." He studied my face for a moment before asking, "You okay?" It wasn't a throwaway greeting. He genuinely wanted to know. I gave a small smile. "Better than you'd think." Quinn nodded. He didn't pry into the messy details of my divorce. I appreciated that immensely. Sometimes, the highest form of respect a friend can show is not asking for the gory details. He slid the stack of folders across the table toward me. "I asked you to meet today because besides the payout, we have some business to discuss." I opened the top folder. It was a comprehensive corporate dossier, financials, growth projections, and a restructuring proposal following the Silicon Valley buyout. Quinn spoke in a measured, professional tone. "Right now, you are one of the placed largest individual minority shareholders in the company. Following the placed acquisition, the parent company wants to retain key legacy stakeholders to ensure stability. I wanted to ask you, do you want to be more involved?" I looked up. "You mean, not just take the cash and walk away? You want me in management? Or at least holding your equity long-term," Quinn explained. "We're slated for an IPO within the next 12 to 18 months. If you hold, your shares could multiply exponentially." I was quiet for a few seconds. A year ago, I would have panicked. I would have felt severe imposter syndrome, made excuses about my lack of corporate pedigree, and politely declined. But today, my only thought was, this is an opportunity. "Do you really think I can handle it?" I asked. Quinn didn't answer immediately. He looked me dead in the eye. 3 years ago, when I called you, you were the only person with the guts to hand me money when this company was nothing but an idea on a whiteboard. You didn't do it because you were rich. You did it because you trusted your gut and you made a decisive bet. Someone with that kind of instinct can learn to handle anything. It wasn't empty flattery. It was pure validation. I nodded slowly. "I want to try." Quinn grinned. "I knew you'd say that." He pulled out another sheet of paper. "Here is a proposal for a project management role. You'll shadow a senior, the director for the first quarter. Once you learn the ropes, you'll run your own division." I stared at the paper. It was a job, a title, a completely different trajectory. From my last 3 years playing the submissive housewife. I picked up a pen and signed the offer letter. In that moment, I wasn't just starting a new job, I was launching a new life. Quinn collected the paperwork. "There's one more thing." I looked at him. The wire transfer error. Finance successfully clawed back the overpayment this morning. Your account should now accurately reflect the $250,000. I nodded. "I know." Quinn looked slightly surprised. "You're not disappointed?" I laughed. "Maybe a little, but I'm not heartbroken." He nodded, looking thoroughly impressed. "Good. Anyone who can keep a level head. About a $2 million swing is going to go very far in this industry." We chatted a bit more about the onboarding process before getting up to leave. Outside the coffee shop, I decided to walk for a bit instead of calling a car. Immediately. The morning rush hour in Chicago was in full swing. People in suits, hurrying to high-rises, students with backpacks, everyone moving in their own direction, living their own lives. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody cared about the drama I had survived yesterday. That anonymity felt like a warm blanket. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The caller ID said Hunter. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then hit decline. Not out of spite, but out of absolute apathy. A few seconds later, a text popped up. "Nora, please. I need to see you one last time. I have something incredibly important to tell you." I read the text and locked my phone without replying. One last time. I knew that phrase all too well. I knew that one last time was always just a manipulative tactic to drag out something that should have been buried. I put the phone back in my pocket and kept walking. Around noon, I headed back to the hotel. The moment I walked into the lobby, the concierge stood up. Miss Nora, you have a guest waiting for you in the lounge. I paused. Who is it? A young woman. She said her name is Mia. I was genuinely surprised. Not that she sought me out, but that she actually had the nerve to come to my hotel. If she wants to see me, send her up, I said. I went up to my suite, kicked off my shoes, and before I could even sit down, there was a knock at the door. I opened it. Mia stood in the hallway. She wasn't wearing a designer wedding gown. She had no heavy makeup on. She was just wearing a plain t-shirt, jeans, and her hair tied back in a messy knot. Her eyes were incredibly swollen. She looked at me, her voice small. Nora, can I come in and talk to you? I studied her for a few seconds, then stepped aside. Come in. Mia walked into the suite, hovering awkwardly in the center of the room, unsure whether to sit or stand. I pointed to an armchair. Sit. She sat down, her fingers tightly interlaced in her lap, staring at the floor. After a long, heavy silence, she finally spoke. Nora, I'm sorry about yesterday. I didn't immediately accept it. What exactly are you sorry for? Mia looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. For forcing my way into your marriage. For saying those awful things to you at the courthouse. And because I thought I had won. She practically whispered the last part. I just looked at her. So, what do you, I think now? Mia let out a broken, cynical laugh. I think I never won a damn thing. The suite was dead quiet. She wiped a tear away and continued. After you left the hotel yesterday, Hunter and I got into a massive screaming match in the WAST bridal suite, he told me. He told me that if it wasn't for me, he wouldn't have lost you. I wasn't surprised in the slightest. That was textbook Hunter behavior. Whenever he lost something valuable, he immediately blamed the closest person to him. And then what? I asked. Mia looked right at me. I want to ask you a question. Go ahead. Did you ever genuinely love him? The question hung in the air. It took me a long time to answer. Yes, I did. Mia nodded, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. Me too. I looked at her. For the first time, I didn't see her as the malicious other, a woman. I just saw a foolish young girl who had made the terrible mistake of betting her life on the wrong man. She stood up. I didn't come here to beg for your forgiveness. I just came to tell you that you weren't the one who was wrong. I didn't say anything. Mia gave a slight nod and walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood there for a moment. I didn't feel a rush, of vindictive pleasure. I just felt a profound sense of closure. There was no one left to blame, nothing left to salvage. There was only me and the road ahead. With Mia gone, the hotel room returned to its quiet state. But this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like the deep breath you take after finally clearing the air, after everything hidden in the dark is dragged out into the light. I poured myself a glass of water, but before I could take a sip, my phone buzzed. Again, it wasn't Hunter, nor was it Heather. It was an unsaved number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? The voice on the other end belonged to an older woman, and it was noticeably trembling. Nora. It's Grace. I wasn't surprised anymore. After Hunter, Heather, and Mia had their turns, it was only natural the matriarch would call. Yes, Grace. What do you need? I kept my tone polite, but strictly distant. There was a pause before she spoke, her voice stripped of its usual arrogance. Nora, could you meet with me for a little bit? What do we have to talk about? I want to talk to you in person, not over the phone. I looked out the window. Where are you? I'm downstairs. In the lobby of your hotel. I asked the front desk. I was slightly taken aback. She actually showed up in person. I stayed silent. For a few seconds, come on up. Okay, I'll be right up. 10 minutes later, there was a tentative knock on my door. I opened it to find Grace. Gone was the opulent plum evening gown and the dripping diamond jewelry. She wore a simple beige cardigan, her hair quickly pinned up, her eyes puffy. She looked like she had aged a decade overnight. She stepped into the suite cautiously, her eyes darting around the luxurious space as if she didn't belong, before awkwardly taking a seat on the edge of the sofa. I didn't sit down. I remained standing, arms crossed, facing her. Say whatever you came here to say, Grace. She stared down at her hands, her voice barely a murmur. Nora, I am so sorry. I didn't react. I'm sorry for the way I treated you for the last 3 years. I remained completely silent. She swallowed hard, her voice cracking. I know how much you sacrificed for this. Family. Taking care of me when I was sick, helping Hunter's business, paying for Heather's wedding. I know you did it all, but I... She trailed off, unable to finish. I looked down at her. If she had said these words a year ago, my heart would have melted. I would have forgiven her instantly, but right now, all I felt was the hollow reality that apologies are absolutely useless when they arrive too late. Are you finished? I asked. She looked up, startled by my lack of emotion. No. Then keep going. My voice wasn't aggressive, but it offered zero warmth. Grace took a shaky breath. Nora, I know it's too late to change anything, but I just want you to know. You were the best daughter-in-law a mother could ever ask for. I let out a dry, cynical laugh. And yet, you still pushed your son to throw me out on the street. She dropped her head, her shoulders shaking. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I walked over to the coffee table and poured her a glass of water, setting it down in front of her. Exactly where were you wrong, Grace? She looked flustered. I listened to gossip. People said you couldn't have kids, and Hunter's business was struggling, and I thought you were bringing us bad luck. I finished her thought for her, and she couldn't look me in the eye. But you don't think I'm bad luck anymore, I stated. She looked up, shaking her head frantically. No, I don't. Because I have money now. It was a direct hit. She sat frozen, unable to deny it. Her silence was her confession. I sat down in the chair opposite her. Grace, do you know what the saddest part of all of this is? She looked at me with red, watery eyes. It's not being yelled at. It's not being kicked out. It's giving every ounce of your soul to a family and realizing they never saw you as a human being, only as a utility. A tear finally escaped Grace's eye and rolled down her cheek. I know I committed a terrible sin against you. I shook my head slowly. Knowing it now doesn't change what happened. The room fell into a heavy silence. After a long while, Grace spoke again, her voice timid. Nora, I won't dare ask you to take Hunter back. But I'm begging. You. Please don't crush him. I stared at her. Ah, there it is. Thomas had asked for the exact same thing last night. Now it was her turn. I wasn't surprised in the slightest. You think I'm actively trying to destroy his life? Hunter told me his biggest clients are pulling out, he said. I cut her off sharply but calmly. Grace, over the last 3 years, who drove to those client meetings? Who drafted the contracts? Who sat in the hotel bars? Until 1 a.m. entertaining those executives so they would sign with us? Grace had no answer. I am not stealing anything that belongs to him, I said. I am simply taking back what is mine. Grace bowed her head. I understand. But I knew she didn't truly understand. If she did, she never would have brought it up. I stood up. Is there anything else? Grace stood up as well, wiping her eyes. Nora, I have one more favor to ask. I didn't answer right away. What is it? This afternoon, Heather is going to the Grand Solaris Hotel. She's going to issue a public apology to you in front of the extended family and the guests who I stayed over. I just want to ask. Please, go easy on her. Don't make it too humiliating for her. I stared at the woman. So this was the real reason she came. Not to apologize for her sins, but to run interference for her golden child. I didn't smile. I just looked at her and asked, yesterday, when Heather stood on that stage with a microphone and humiliated me in front of hundreds of people, did you ask her to go easy on me? Grace's mouth opened, but no words came out. Don't worry, I said smoothly. I won't do anything excessive. I just want to make sure the record is set straight. She nodded, fresh tears falling. I understand. You should go, I have work to do. Grace walked to the door, hesitating before she opened it. Nora, regardless of everything, I truly hope you have a good life. I didn't respond. I just gave her a curt nod. The door clicked shut. I stood in the center of the room. Hunter, Heather, Grace. 3 different apologies. But they all shared one defining characteristic. They only arrived after they realized I was no longer the powerless woman they could step on. I didn't hate them for it. It was just human nature. But I would never, ever allow them back into my life. My phone buzzed. A text from Quinn. Are you free this afternoon? I want to introduce you to some department heads at the office. I looked at the text, then at the clock. At 3 p.m., Heather was scheduled to stand on a stage and beg for my forgiveness. On one side was my toxic past. On the other was my future. I smiled and typed my reply. I have a brief errand to run. I'll head over right after. I put the phone in my purse and headed out the door. I wasn't going to the hotel for revenge. I was going for closure. I arrived back at the Grand Solaris Hotel at exactly 10 minutes to 3. I didn't show up early to make a scene. I just wanted a few moments to look at the place. Just 24 hours ago, I stood in this exact lobby as an outcast. Today, I walked in entirely on my own terms. I didn't need an invitation, I didn't need permission, and I certainly didn't need to keep my head down. The lobby was much quieter today. The massive floral arches and welcome signs were gone. But outside the smaller banquet hall, a crowd was already gathering. Most of them were guests from yesterday's disaster. They hadn't stuck around out of loyalty. They were here because the promise of a wealthy, arrogant family issuing a groveling public apology was the kind of drama people cancel their flights for. As I walked down the hall, heads turned. Some looked at me with intense curiosity, some with pity, and some with a cautious respect, the way you look at someone you know you shouldn't mess with. I ignored all of them. I walked into the banquet hall. It had been rearranged. No dining tables, rows of chairs facing a small, elevated stage with a single microphone stand. Simple, but highly effective. Attorney Pierce, my legal counsel for the divorce, was already there sitting in the front row. When he saw me, he stood up and nodded. Miss Nora. I took the seat next to him. Is everything prepped? Yes, I reviewed the draft of her apology statement. It meets all our requirements. We're just waiting for them to take the stage. I nodded. I don't need to do anything. I'm just here to listen. 5 minutes later, the side doors opened. Heather walked in. Yesterday, she was a vision in ruby red, caked in makeup, laughing loudly and commanding the room. Today, she wore a shapeless, conservative black dress. She wore absolutely zero makeup. Her eyes were severely bloodshot, and she walked with a slow, heavy shuffle. All her arrogant swagger had evaporated. Following closely behind her were Grace and Thomas. Hunter was there too, but he hung back near the rear doors, refusing to come down the aisle. I locked eyes with him for a fraction of a second before he quickly looked down at his shoes. I felt absolutely nothing. Heather climbed the steps to the stage. She held a single piece of paper in her hand. Her hands were shaking so violently that the paper audibly rustled through the microphone. The room was dead silent. Nobody whispered, nobody coughed. Hundreds of eyes were glued to her. Heather stood at the mic for several agonizing seconds. She took a shuddering breath and began to read. My name is Heather. I am Hunter's older sister. Her voice wasn't loud or sharp anymore. It was brittle, cracking at the edges, like someone being forced to speak at gunpoint. Yesterday, in this very hotel, I said terrible, untrue things about Nora. She paused, swallowing hard. No one in the audience made a sound. I called Nora useless. I called her a curse. I said she didn't deserve to be in our family. Saying the words out loud seemed to physically pain her. I stand here today to admit that everything I said was a lie. I was entirely wrong. Heather looked up from the paper, her red-rimmed eyes finding me in the front row. Over the last 3 years, Nora sacrificed everything for our family. She took care of my mother. She worked relentlessly to keep my brother's business afloat. She was a devoted, responsible woman. The silence in the room was deafening. I deeply apologized to Nora for my cruel words and for how horribly I treated her. Her voice broke into a sob. And I admit, my brother did not deserve her. When that final sentence dropped, a collective, quiet gasp swept through the crowd. It wasn't shock at the fact itself, but shock that the notoriously proud Heather actually forced those words past her lips. Heather lowered the paper. Her arms fell limply to her sides. She stood on the paper. Stage, completely broken, unsure of what to do next. Attorney Pierce looked at me. I knew it was my cue. I stood up. Every eye in the room followed me. I walked up the steps to the stage. I didn't rush, nor did I drag my feet. My steps were even and deliberate. I stopped a few feet away from Heather. I didn't reach for the microphone right away. I just looked at her. Heather, I asked quietly, are you finished? She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes. Do you? Do you want to add anything? No. I gave a slight nod. Only then did I reach out and pull the microphone toward me. I looked out over the crowd, the exact same faces that had laughed at me yesterday when Heather was tearing me apart. I spoke in a calm, clear voice that echoed through the room. Yesterday, I sat in the back of this hotel and listened to Heather talk about me. She said I was a burden. She said I was a failure. She said I brought her family nothing but bad luck. I paused, letting the words sink in. I didn't. I stopped her yesterday. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to hear exactly how low her opinion of me was. Heather dropped her gaze to the floor. I looked back out at the audience. Today, she is standing up here taking it all back. Not because she suddenly found a moral compass, but because circumstances forced her hand. A few people in the crowd nodded slowly in agreement. I don't need anyone in this room to tell me I'm a good person, I continued. And I certainly don't need a forced apology to validate my worth. I turned slightly to look directly at Heather. But I did need one thing. Heather looked up, terrified. What? From this day forward, I want you to remember never to strip another human being of their dignity just because they don't possess the things you worship. Heather remained dead silent. Money, status, a pretty face. All of those things can vanish overnight. I said slowly, ensuring every word landed. But how you treat people when I think you have the upper hand. That is the only thing that proves who you really are. The banquet hall was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I stepped back from the mic. I accept your apology, Heather. Not so we can go back to being a family, but so we never have to speak to each other again. I didn't drop the mic dramatically. I just placed it back on the stand, turned around, and walked down the stairs. I had nothing left to say, and no reason to stay a minute longer. As I walked down the aisle toward the exit, I passed Hunter near the back doors. He reached out a hand, his voice a pathetic whisper. Nora. I stopped for a split second, but I didn't turn to look at him. Hold on to whatever you have left, Hunter. Don't lose the rest of it. I pushed through the double doors and walked out into the lobby. The afternoon sun was just as bright as yesterday, but I felt infinitely lighter. I hear anyone calling my name. There was nothing left dragging me backward. I pulled out my phone and texted Quinn. Done here. Heading your way now. One incredibly long chapter of my life had just permanently closed, and an entirely new one was already being written. Stepping out onto the bustling Chicago streets, the late afternoon sun washed over the concrete. The oppressive weight that had been sitting on my chest for 3 years was completely gone. The constant need to shrink myself to avoid criticism, the anxiety of walking on eggshells around my in-laws, it had all evaporated. I felt like I had just walked out of a long, dark tunnel into a cool, crisp autumn morning. I finally realized how exhausting it had been to survive in that family. I didn't hail a cab immediately. I just walked along the avenue, watching the city breathe. Businessmen rushing past with coffees, teenagers laughing on the corner, tourists snapping photos. It was entirely ordinary, and that ordinariness hit me like a ton of bricks. The world keeps spinning. Nobody on this street knew what I had just been through. Nobody cared that I had just forced my ex-sister-in-law to grovel on a stage. My trauma was my own, and to the rest of the world, I was just another pedestrian. It was a remarkably comforting thought. I let out a long exhale, pulled out my phone, and ordered an Uber. 15 minutes later, I stood in front of the sleek glass skyscraper that housed Quinn's corporate headquarters. It looked entirely different from the cramped, chaotic office space I used to manage for Hunter. It wasn't just bigger, it was organized, structured, and pulsed with the quiet hum of real, sustainable success. It wasn't a place where people were desperately putting out fires to survive the week. I walked into the lobby. A polished receptionist looked up with a warm smile. Good afternoon. How can I help you? I'm here to see Quinn. Do you have an appointment? I texted him I was coming. She checked her computer and nodded. Ah, yes. Mr. Quinn is expecting you on the 18th floor. Please go right up. I stepped into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I caught my reflection in the mirrored panels. I looked the same, but the energy radiating from me had fundamentally shifted. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't second-guessing myself. I knew exactly where I was going. The elevator dinged at the 18th floor. Quinn was leaning against the reception desk waiting for me. He had ditched his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, looking like the casual, brilliant tech founder he was. You made it, he said, smiling. I did. It's done. He nodded, not pressing for gossip. Good. Come on, let me give you the grand tour. He walked me through the sprawling office. He introduced me to different departments, marketing, development, finance. He wasn't showing off. He was explaining how the machine worked. The personnel, the corporate hierarchy, the corporate hierarchy, the corporate hierarchy, operational flow. I listened quietly, but my mind was in overdrive, constantly, comparing this to Hunter's disorganized mess. Not out of spite, but as a case study. I was finally understanding why some businesses scale into empires while others drown in their own incompetence. We ended the tour in his corner office. It wasn't overly flashy, but it was pristine. He poured me a glass of sparkling water and sat across from me. So, what do you think? He asked. I took a sip. It's different. Different how? Here, people are actually working to build something. At my old place, we were just hustling to survive another month. Quinn chuckled. That's a brutally accurate assessment. After a moment of comfortable silence, he leaned forward. So, I have a formal proposition for you. I met his eyes. What kind of proposition? Come work with me. Directly. I wasn't entirely shocked, but I took my time answering. In what capacity? Director of Business Development, running the exact same client acquisition and relationship management strategies you were running for your ex. I nodded slowly. Aren't you worried I'll bring all my personal baggage and drama into your firm? Quinn shook his head. The drama isn't you, Nora. The drama is the idiots who were too blind to see your value. It was a simple statement, but it struck deep. I stayed quiet for a moment. Take your time to think about it, he offered. I won't pressure you. But I will say this. Whether you come work for me or you go out and bootstrap your own company, you need to build something for yourself. Do not ever let yourself go backward. Going backward isn't an option, I assured him. Quinn nodded, looking satisfied, and smoothly changed the subject. Have you eaten lunch yet? No, skipped it. He stood up, grabbing his blazer. Let's go. My treat. We walked to a bustling, modern bistro a few blocks away. It wasn't a pretentious Michelin star restaurant, just a place with incredible food and a vibrant atmosphere. We sat in a booth, ordered, and Quinn looked at me over his coffee. Do you think you'll ever talk to Hunter again? I spun my water glass slowly. No, it's a clean break. Some people, if you let them back in, they just trap you in a rerun of the same bad movie. Agreed, Quinn said. A moment later, I asked him a question. Have you ever regretted putting your trust in the wrong people? He thought about it for a second. Yeah, I have. And how did you deal with it? By realizing that I wasn't wrong for trusting them, I was only wrong if I kept trusting them after they showed me exactly who they were. I stared at him. That was exactly what I needed to hear. Our food arrived, and the conversation shifted to normal, everyday things. We didn't talk about my trauma or his corporate buyout. We just talked. It felt so incredibly light. There was no hidden agenda, no walking on eggshells. Just two equals enjoying a meal. After lunch, Quinn ordered a car to drop me back at my hotel. As I opened the Quinn ordered a car to drop me back at my hotel. Door to get out. I looked back at him. Thank you, Quinn. For what? For not asking me a million questions. He smiled gently. I know that some stories only need to be told when you're ready to tell them. I nodded, closed the door, and walked into the hotel lobby. Riding the elevator up to my suite, I watched the floor numbers tick higher and higher. My mind was completely clear of the past. Instead, it was filling up with raw, unformed ideas for my future. I was no longer a victim being swept along by someone else's current. I was the captain of my own ship. I unlocked my suite. the heavy door clicking shut behind me. The room was perfectly still, but it didn't feel empty anymore. Because starting tomorrow, the real work was going to begin. No more relying on a husband. No more trying to prove my worth to in-laws. Just putting one foot in front of the other. And this time, I was walking entirely for myself. That night, I didn't fall asleep immediately. Not because I was ruminating over the wreckage of my marriage, but because for the first time in forever, the anchor holding me in the past had been completely severed. I lay in the dark, staring up at the ceiling, letting my mind go totally blank. It was a luxurious kind of emptiness, the kind you only achieve when you have truly, deeply let go of something, rather than just pretending to ignore it. I thought about what Quinn had said at lunch. Do not ever let yourself go backward. It sounded simple, but actually executing it required ruthless discipline. It meant cutting ties with the people, but also killing the habits, the self-doubt, and the deeply ingrained instinct to put everyone else's needs above my own. For years, I had equated stability with being a good wife, but I finally realized that my version of stability was just standing perfectly still. Inside a cage, I was too afraid to leave. My phone, resting on the nightstand, lit up. It wasn't a call, it was an Alpay. Automated text message. I reached over and checked it. It was from my bank, confirming that the accounting error had been resolved, and the excess funds had been reversed. My balance now accurately reflected the $250,000. It was no longer a jaw-dropping billionaire figure, but to me, it was seed money. It was the foundation of my independence. I stared at the number for a moment, locked the screen, and went to sleep. Money is just a tool. What matters is the hands holding it. I woke up early the next morning without an alarm. My body naturally jolted. Awake, primed with the energy of having an actual purpose. I made a cup of Nespresso from the machine in the room, stepped out onto the small balcony, and watched Chicago come alive. Delivery trucks navigating the alleys, coffee shops, opening their doors, commuters flooding the sidewalks. It was a gritty, relentless rhythm, not glamorous, but incredibly resilient. I took a sip of my coffee, pulled out my phone, and scrolled down my contacts, until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Bob Barnes. Bob was an old business associate of my late father's. He ran a mid-sized logistics and wholesale supply company in the suburbs. It wasn't a sexy Silicon Valley startup, but it was a rock-solid, incredibly lucrative business. During the darkest days of my marriage, I used to fantasize that if I ever left Hunter, I would call Bob for a job. I pressed dial. It rang twice before he picked up. Barnes Logistics, Bob speaking. Hi, Bob. It's Nora. There was a second of silence, followed by a booming, warm voice. Nora, good. Lord, kiddo, it's been ages. How are you? I'm sorry it's been so long since we caught up, I said warmly. Don't worry about it. How are things? I heard through the grapevine and... He hesitated. I got divorced. Yes. Bob let out a heavy sigh. I heard a rumor. Are you doing okay? I'm doing great, Bob. I didn't want to dwell on the sob story. Actually, the reason I'm calling is, I wanted to ask if you had any openings at your company. Bob went quiet for a moment. You want to get back in the game? I do, but I don't want to start from the absolute bottom. I want to do something I know how to do. Bob chuckled. I know you know the business, Nora. I never doubted that for a second. But let me ask you straight. Do you want to work for me, or do you want to work for yourself? The question made me pause. I'm weighing my options. Bob's tone turned serious, the mentor coming out. Nora, I'm going to shoot. Straight with you. You've got the brains and the grit. I know that. But if you just jump into another W-2 job working for someone else's bottom line, you're always going to be dependent. If you have a little capital and you have the contacts, you should seriously consider hanging your own shingle. I looked out at the Chicago skyline. I'm just worried about the risk. Bob laughed out loud. If you aren't terrified, you aren't doing it right. Risk is the price of admission. You either choose safety or you choose opportunity. You can't have a massive upside with zero risk. I bit my lip, absorbing his words. I'm not going to pressure you, Bob added softly. But if you decide to launch your own brokerage or supply firm, I'll back you. I'll front you inventory at cost, and I'll toss you a couple of my overflow clients to get your feet wet. The rest is on you. I took a deep breath. Let me think about it, Bob, seriously. Take your time, kid. Just don't overthink it into paralysis. I won't. Thanks, Bob. I hung up the phone. I had two incredibly clear paths sitting in front of me. Path A, take Quinn's offer. Go corporate. Get a six-figure salary, a corner. Office, equity, and absolute stability. Path B, take Bob's advice. Bootstrap my own business. It would be infinitely harder, riskier, and lonelier. But I would. Own 100% of it. I didn't make a decision right then. I wanted to be absolutely certain. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. Hunter. I stared at the screen. The phone kept vibrating. I didn't answer. I just let it ring out. A minute later, a text arrived. Nora, I just want to see you one last time, please. I looked at the message. I felt no anger, no annoyance. I just felt complete indifference. I put the phone face down on the counter without replying. Some meetings are just completely unnecessary. By noon, my phone rang again. It was Quinn. Did you eat lunch yet? Not yet. Come downstairs. I'm in the lobby. I was surprised. You came all the way over here? Yeah, get down here. I grabbed my jacket and went down to the lobby. Quinn was standing near the elevators holding two brown paper takeout bags from a famous local deli. Got us. Sandwiches. Let's eat up in your room. We went back up to the suite and unpacked the food. The smell of warm pastrami. I filled the room. It was incredibly mundane, but it made me feel grounded. After a few bites, Quinn looked at me. Have you made a decision? I put my sandwich down. Do you want the safe answer or the honest answer? Quinn smirked. Always the honest one. I looked him dead in the eye. I want to start my own company. Quinn nodded slowly. He didn't look surprised in the slightest. I figured as much. You don't think it's insanely reckless? Oh, it's totally reckless, he said flatly. But if you didn't take the leap, you wouldn't be you. I laughed out loud. You act like you know me so well. I know enough, Quinn said, taking a bite of his food. Listen, whatever you need, just ask. I'm not going to hold your hand, but I'll give you whatever. Resources or introductions you need to get off the ground. I nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude. Thank you. We finished our lunch chatting about industry trends. By the time he left, my path was set in stone. I wasn't going back to corporate America. I wasn't going to be someone's employee. I was going to build my own empire. That afternoon, I went to a stationery store, bought a thick leather notebook, and sat at the desk in my hotel room. I started writing out my business plan. It wasn't a 50-page corporate manifesto filled with buzzwords. It was raw, actionable steps. Sourcing, logistics, overhead, margins, target clients. I had done all of this before. I had built Hunter's operations from the ground, two up. But back then, I was doing it for a husband who took all the credit. Now, every single calculation, every single risk, and every single dollar was mine. The pressure was immense, but the thrill was intoxicating. I remembered what Bob had said. You either choose safety or you choose opportunity. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Quinn. Finished planning your world domination yet? I smiled and texted back. Almost. Don't stay at the office too late. Yes, boss, he replied. It was a simple, teasing exchange, but it warmed me. It wasn't overbearing. It was just supportive. I worked until midnight, finally closing the notebook when my eyes couldn't focus anymore. I turned off the lamp and slipped into bed. I fell asleep. Instantly. There was no tossing and turning, no ghosts of the past haunting my haldered thoughts. I knew exactly what I had to do the next day. The following morning, I dressed in a sharp blazer and took an Uber out to the Blacken Industrial Park in the suburbs to meet Bob. His logistics warehouse wasn't pretty. It smelled of cardboard, diesel exhaust, and stale coffee. But to me, it smelled like money and hard work. Bob was on the floor arguing with a forklift driver when I walked in. When he saw me, his face lit up. Nora, look who it is. Hi, Bob. He turned to his floor manager. This girl used to run operations for her. Ex-husband. Sharpest knife in the drawer. I just smiled politely. When we got to his cluttered, glass-walled office, he cut to the chase. So, you made up your mind? I'm going solo, Bob. He grinned, clapping his hands together. Good. Where are you starting? I slid my leather notebook across his desk. He put on his reading glasses and flipped through the pages. He didn't say a word for 10 minutes. Occasionally, he would grunt, nod, or tap a pen against the desk. Finally, he closed the book. The math is solid, Nora. But remember, a spreadsheet is one thing. Getting punched in the mouth by a client is another. I know, Bob. I'm ready. Do you have any accounts lined up? Not yet, I admitted. I was going to start cold calling my old Rolodex, but avoiding Hunter's direct clients. Bob scoffed. Don't bother cold calling. I told you I'd hook you up. He picked up his desk phone, dialed a number, and waited. Hey, Jim. It's Bob. Listen, I got a hotshot broker sitting in my office starting her own firm. She's the real deal. I want you to meet with her. He listened for a second, then handed the receiver to me. Introduce yourself. I took the phone. My heart fluttered for a microsecond, but my voice came out smooth, professional, and confident. I pitched my services efficiently, maintaining a calm, authoritative tone. Within 3 minutes, I had secured a lunch meeting for the following day. I handed the phone back to Bob. He smirked. See that? Bob said. Opportunities don't just fall out of the sky. But when a door opens, you better be ready to kick it off the hinges. I understand. Thank you, Bob. He stood up. Come on, let me walk you through the warehouse. I'll show you. Where people usually get screwed on shipping margins. I spent the next 3 hours absorbing decades of industry knowledge. By the CDOP time I left, my brain was buzzing. But my business model was bulletproof. The next afternoon, I had my first client meeting. We met at a quiet, upscale cafe. Jim was a no-nonsense, gruff businessman in his 50s. We didn't exchange pleasantries. We got straight down to numbers. I didn't oversell myself, and I didn't hide the fact that my firm was brand new. I just laid out exactly how I could streamline his supply chain and cut his overhead by 8%. When I finished, Jim crossed his arms and looked at me. You're a startup. Why? Should I hand you my logistics instead of going with an established firm? I didn't blink, because I used to run the back end for one of those established firms. If they were as efficient as I am, I wouldn't have found an 8% redundancy in your current contracts. Jim stared at me for a long, tense moment. Then, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. All right, I'll give you a small trial contract. You deliver on time, we'll talk about the rest of my portfolio. I didn't cheer or act overly eager. I simply reached out and shook his hand. You won't regret it, Jim. When I walked out of the cafe, the late afternoon sun hit my face. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and let out a massive, shaky breath. My first independent contract. It wasn't $1 million deal, but it was mine. I didn't call anyone to brag. I didn't post it on social media. I just savored the quiet victory. That evening, back in my hotel, I was meticulously logging the contract details into my laptop when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I picked it up. Hello? Nora, it's Hunter. I stopped typing, but my heart rate didn't even spike. What do you want? Hunter? His voice sounded exhausted, defeated. I'm not calling to beg you to come back. I just wanted to ask if you were doing okay. I sat back in my chair. I'm doing perfectly fine. I heard through the grapevine you started your own firm. I did. He paused, a heavy, pathetic silence hanging on the line. Well, good luck to you, Nora. Whether he meant it genuinely, or it was just the final whimper of a broken ego, I didn't care. Thank you, I said, and I hung up. I didn't block the number. I didn't rage. I just set the phone down and went back to typing. He was no longer a villain in my story. He was just a ghost. I know. Longer feared. The weeks turned into months, and time flew by faster than I could track. Not because I was busy avoiding my feelings, but because I was too busy building my life. Running a business wasn't a fairy tale. There were days when shipments got delayed at the port, days when clients threatened to pull their contracts over, minor errors, and days when the sheer stress of managing cash flow made me want to pull my hair out. Every mistake came directly out of my own pocket, but every victory belonged to me too. One evening, I was sitting on the floor of my new apartment. I had finally moved out of the hotel and leased a beautiful loft in the West Loop surrounded by invoices. I found a massive billing error from a supplier that would have completely wiped out my profit margin for the quarter. I spent an hour on the phone, ruthlessly negotiating with the vendor until they agreed to correct the invoice and credit my account. When I finally hung up, I leaned my head back against the sofa and burst out, laughing. A year ago, if Hunter had yelled at me over a billing error, I would have cried in the bathroom. Today, I just went to war and won. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. A few months later, my firm was officially in the black. I had expanded to 5 major accounts, hired a small support team, and secured an office space. One Friday evening, I was doing a final inventory check when Quinn texted me. "Free tonight? Dinner with some industry folks. You should come." I glanced at my watch. "Sure. Send me the address." I threw on a tailored blazer over a silk camisole and met him at an upscale steakhouse downtown. When I walked in, Quinn was waiting by the bar. He looked at me, his eyes lighting up with genuine admiration. "You look different," he said. I smiled. "Different how?" "Like someone who owns the room." I didn't argue. He led me to a private dining room where several high-level tech and logistics executives were gathered. Quinn didn't introduce me as his friend or as his former investor. He introduced me as the CEO of my own firm. The way these heavyweights looked at me with immediate professional respect was intoxicating. I held my own in conversations about supply chain disruptions and market scaling. When the dinner ended and we walked out onto the bustling Chicago streets, Quinn turned to me. "How did that feel?" "It felt like I belonged," I said honestly. He smiled. "You always did. You just had to remember it." We walked for a few blocks in a comfortable, easy silence. The city lights reflected off the Chicago River, casting a golden glow over the pavement. Suddenly, Quinn slowed his pace and looked at me. "Nora, can I ask you a serious question?" I looked up at him. "Go ahead. Have you ever thought about opening yourself up to a new relationship?" I didn't flinch, but I took my time answering. "I have, but I'm not in a rush. I used to be terrified of being alone. Now, I love my peace so much that someone is going to have to be truly exceptional to make me want to share it." Quinn nodded slowly, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. "That's exactly the right answer. There's absolutely no rush." He didn't push. He didn't make a grand, dramatic confession. He just walked beside me, steady and present. And for the first time in a very long time, the idea of sharing my life with someone didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a possibility. As the year drew to a close, my life settled into a beautiful, predictable rhythm. I wasn't a billionaire, but I was financially independent, respected in my industry, and entirely at peace. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in the back of an Uber, heading to a client meeting. The car was stopped at a red light in the financial district. I casually glanced out the rain-streaked window and saw a beat-up sedan pulled up. In the lane next to us, sitting in the driver's seat, was Hunter. He looked exhausted. He was wearing a wrinkled shirt, his face drawn and pale, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who had been beaten down by life. As he waited for the light to change, he turned his head and looked through my window. Our eyes met. For 3 long seconds, we stared at each other through the rain and the glass. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, no desperation to win me back. There was just a hollow, profound sense of regret. He looked like a man who finally realized he had traded a diamond for a handful of dirt. The light turned green. My Uber accelerated, pulling smoothly away. I didn't look back. I didn't feel a surge of vindictive joy. I just felt nothing. He was just a guy in traffic. That night, standing on the balcony of my loft, I looked out over the glittering expanse of Chicago. It was the exact same view I had on my first night in the hotel, but the woman looking at it had been entirely rebuilt. I thought about the last 3 years, the tears, the humiliation, the nights, spent feeling worthless. I didn't hate those memories anymore. They were the fire that forged the iron. I whispered into the cold night air, talking to myself. "You did it, Nora." No one heard me, but the universe didn't need to. I heard myself, and that was enough. My phone vibrated on the patio table. It was a text from Quinn. "Breakfast tomorrow? Pancakes are on me." I smiled, picked up the phone, and typed, "It's a date." I turned off my phone, stepped back inside, and closed the glass door. People often say that life is like riding a train. Some people get on, some people get off, and some ride with you for a very long time. But eventually, some people are meant to disembark at a station you leave behind. The most important thing isn't who stays with you until the end of the line. It's what you manage to keep inside your own soul after they're gone. Money can be earned back. Houses, cars, and status can be rebuilt from the ground up. But trust, once shattered, can never be glued back together perfectly. When genuine loyalty is traded for superficial gain, the person making that trade loses the most valuable asset they will ever possess. In this life, the true measure of a person isn't how wealthy they become, but how decently they treat the people who stood by them when they had nothing. Karma has a funny way of balancing the scales. Those who operate with integrity and grace will eventually find their path illuminated, and those who betray the people who loved them most will eventually find themselves wealthy, perhaps, but entirely alone in a very cold house. Never mistake a kind heart for a weak one. Never mistake a woman's silence for ignorance. Sometimes people endure not because they are trapped, but because they honor their commitments. But when the fire goes out, their silence is simply the sound of them packing their bags to leave forever. Walking through the fire taught me one undeniable truth. Conquering others is nothing compared to conquering your own fears. Maintaining your grace in a world that tries to make you bitter is the ultimate victory. And at the end of the Fanze day, the greatest peace comes from looking in the mirror and knowing you never compromised your soul, and you never betrayed the people who genuinely cared for you. If anyone out there is currently sitting in the dark, feeling undervalued, mocked, or discarded, do not despair. As long as you can still stand up, as long as you keep your spine straight, your heart kind, and your self-respect intact, the universe will eventually clear a new path for you. Because in the end, betting on your own integrity is the only investment that never fails.